Hi guys, it's Professor Spencer, and I'm going to be teaching about clauses and sentence types. Let's get right to clauses. So, there are two types of clauses, independent and dependent. An independent clause is something that can stand alone. So, it pretty much can just be a sentence. So, like I said, it stands alone and it makes sense. Also, it has all the components of a sentence, which are needing a subject and a predicate. And so that's pretty much the basis of an independent clause. Just remember that it needs a subject and a predicate. That's very important. But an example is like peanut butter. Peanut butter tastes great by itself. It's my favorite. And it doesn't need any help from anybody else to make it taste good. Now on to a dependent clause. Dependent clause can sometimes be half of a sentence, but it can't stand alone. And normally, it only has half of the components, so it may only have a subject or a predicate. In some cases, though, it does have both, but they just don't really fit and doesn't really make sense. Think of it this way. Think of it as pumpkin. Pumpkin doesn't taste good by itself, but when you mix peanut butter in or another treat, it tastes really good. Okay, now I'm going to go briefly over sentence types. So, there are 4 different types: a simple, compound, complex, and a compound complex sentence. So, a simple sentence just has one independent clause. So, all these different sentence types are just a combination of different clauses. So, simple, just one independent clause. A compound is 2 independent clauses. A complex is 1 independent clause and 1 dependent clause. And a compound complex is 2 independent clauses plus 1 dependent clause. So, an example for a simple is just, let's go to the dog park. Simple, subject and a predicate, 1 independent clause. And for a compound, which is 2 independent clauses, you could say, let's go to the dog park now. If we go later, it will rain. So, you can split that up and they both make sense on their own. Let's go to the dog park now. That could be a sentence. Or, if we go later, it will rain. That could be in its own sentence. So, for complex, 1 independent plus 1 dependent. Professor Spencer is awesome and gets attention. Professor Spencer is awesome is just a known fact and can be a sentence and stand by itself. And gets attention can't stand by itself because it doesn't have a subject and a predicate. So, 2 independent clauses plus 1 dependent clause. Delta is annoying most of the time. He still is fun to play with though. Delta is annoying is a complete sentence. Delta is what? Annoying. Simple. Most of the time. That's not really a sentence. You can't really use that. And then he is still fun to play with though. That could be a complete sentence and just stand by itself. Think of it as stools. I kind of think of it as a stool. An independent clause is like a stool that can stand up straight and by itself. But a dependent clause is like the 2-legged stool that doesn't stand by itself, so it needs some support. Okay, so for sentence types, the way that you can combine different clauses is by either using a semicolon, a colon, or an awubis word. And an awubis word is just a subordinating conjunction. So, it's fun to say too, awubis. Anyway, the words are although, after, as, when, while, until, before, because, if, since. So when you're combining these conjunctions, or when you're combining these different clauses, make sure you either use a comma, a semicolon, or an awubis word. Okay, that's a brief overview of sentence types and clauses. I hope you guys learned lots, and we'll see you next time with Professor Spencer.